Right, here we are. This is the next part in our series of videos for the one-day course PNE. The next one we have is Introduction to Business. So let's get going. So I think a very common mindset when you start a business is I'm not a business. I'm just me, and I'm just selling stuff and or selling a product or service. So you are a business, and it's key that like if you're going to start a business, essentially whatever route you go down, sole trader, limited company, I'll go through all the routes in a very short while, but it's important for you to recognize that you are a business, and you need to make sure you understand your legal and financial obligations for that. So whether that's the tax you have to pay or accounts you have to submit, the records you need to keep. Um, you need to make sure you're basically doing everything that you need to do in order to comply with the law. That is hugely important, and I can't stress how important that is. It's also just important to understand that having a great idea isn't the only thing you need to start a business. In order to be able to turn a great idea into a business, you also need, a quite a lot of hard work and a lot of different skills as well. So let's just go over different types of skills now that are involved in being an entrepreneur. So an entrepreneur is someone who starts their own business and seizes new opportunities in order to make money. So there are some hugely important skills in order to do this. One of them, let's start with problem solving. I mean, businesses are nothing but problems. Like the whole way through, you're gonna come over hurdles. Nothing will go quite to plan, and you'll need to think on your feet and solve the problems as they come. So that's completely separate to as well the fact that most businesses themselves, their product or service is solving a problem. I mean, that's the whole point of them. Um, if you're a dog walker, you're solving the problem of people maybe not having the time or the ability to walk their dogs. If you're Greg's, you're solving the problem of people being hungry. Like every business has found a problem that their customer has, and they're working to solve it. So you need to have that mindset. You need to be able to approach problems and be able to work out the solution to them. Strategic thinking is important to not just sort of bumble into a business, just sort of, you know, reacting to things going wrong rather than actually sort of preempting a strategy, having a plan for the business going forward. Where's the business going to be in a year's time, or even 6 months' time? And what is your route to trying to get to that point? It does require quite a lot of strategic thinking and understanding as well of your market, so you can make these decisions. So this is why market research is quite useful, because it allows you to make those strategic decisions. If you, for example, we're going to aim at a certain target market, and then you realize that target market we're already catered for, so you went to a different one. That is a strategic decision, and you wouldn't be able to make that without understanding first your target market. Communication, absolutely vital in so many different ways. You will need to communicate your business idea to a bunch of different audiences in a bunch of different ways, and also just the ongoing act of running a business requires great communication, whether that's communicating with your customers, or communicating your idea through things like advertising, making yourself understood and the value of your idea understood to potential investors, or just talking on an everyday basis to people within your business. Whether that's people you're buying stock from or people that you need help with in order to make the business happen. Communication is absolutely key, so make sure that you are building that skill. Decision making as well. This is a big one because you are the decision maker in your business. If you're running it, if you're the director, if you're a sole trader, if you're in charge, no one's going to make these decisions for you, and the decision that you have to make may not be obvious, so you have to work on that, being decisive, and making well-informed choices. So I've just listed four important entrepreneurial skills that you can have. What I like. Ooh, Sorry, I should forgot to get rid of the thing at the bottom. Oops. What I'd like you to do, so as I say, this would usually be an activity in your groups, but what I want you to do is essentially have a think about now, and maybe write down a list if you can, of important entrepreneurial skills other than the ones I've just gone through. So what skills can you think of that an entrepreneur might need in order to progress their business or start their business even? Right, I'm going to ask again, pause your video. I'd say give yourself a minute, 2 minutes to have a go at this, and unpause it once you're done. So go. Okay, I'm going to assume that you've done that, and you're now back in the room. So a few obviously I can't I can't feed back the skills you've written down, so I'm just gonna I just wanted to give you a chance to have a real think about it and to understand as well, right? You've probably just come up with a list of skills. Do you have those skills? Are those skills something you can build? Do you have access to someone who has them if you don't? Like, so for example, if communication isn't your thing, but you have a business partner and that's what they excel at, that's fantastic. In any case, when you have a business partner, I think you want to find or someone else in your business. It doesn't have to be a business partner. It could be an employee within your business. You need to find people who don't have the same skill set that you have, so that you have all the bases covered. I just thought of well, essentially a few more skills as well as the ones on the screen right now. One of them is risk taker. Now, when I say risk taker, I mean a calculated risk taker. So not someone who's just gonna, well, it's high risk, high reward usually, but essentially you need to, in order to have a sustainable business that doesn't sort of peter out very quickly, it's unavoidable to take risks because every business has risk. Every business will have money or resources or time that you put into it, and it's never 100% certain what you'll get back in return. So you need to be able to take risks, but also be able to understand that the outcome of that risk and essentially sort of work to those terms. Time management is a huge one, and it's one that I struggle with massively. Taking account of the amount of time you have and making sure that you have enough time to do what you need to do within your business. Making sure you're efficient with your time as well, because when you have a business, essentially time and money are the same thing. Time that you're spending on one thing, even if it's free to do, you need to understand that if you could be spending that time in a way that more efficiently gets your sales up or helps you produce stock or gets things done within the business, that's essentially you exchanging time for money. Networking, talking to other people, making connections with other people, I'd say mostly online at the moment. Don't be doing that in person, but well, to an extent. Networking is huge because a business doesn't just have, or at least making connections with other people or building up your network is absolutely huge and vital, because a business doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It won't just work if it's just you. You need to connect yourself with people that can help you, people that you can help or sort of support in return maybe for their support. Networks of people that can essentially speak for you and be your referrals and shout about your business and praise your business to other people is an absolutely huge thing, and no business can grow without that sort of network of people, whether that's a network of loyal customers or a network of fellow potential entrepreneurs. You want to get the word out to as many people as possible, so you need to find those people. Right, cool. I have one more, and then I'll move on to the next slide, which is going to be about business structures, I think. And that is adaptability. Being able to adapt and being able to evolve and change is just incredibly vital to a business, because no one's going to get it 100% right the first time. Everyone's going to have something they can change, something they can improve, and it may be quite huge. It may be quite a big thing you need to change. It could be your whole product. It could be your target market. It could be quite a big, substantial thing like that. And so you need to be adaptable in order to change and suit the needs of your customers, or change customers to ones that better that need your product. Um, being adaptable is huge, because just sticking to the same thing resolutely won't often be the best move for your business. You need to be able to change, adapt, evolve, all that sort of stuff. Right. So let me talk to you a little bit about different business structures. So the most common one, the sort of easiest one, the simplest one, is a sole trader. So what a sole trader is you registering as a sole trader online and telling the government, I am self-employed and this is sort of my business, and I now have a source of income from this business, and you then have to submit self-assessment tax returns every year. Now, you can be a sole trader and you can be self-employed alongside employment. Is something you can do. It would just mean that in that tax return, when you tell the government about your income, you would tell them about the income from your employment, and you would also tell them about the income from your self-employment. So when you're a sole trader, you and your business are essentially the same legal entity. It's straightforward. You can set it up. It's free to set up, and you can do so online. And I'd advise doing so with ourselves. If you talk to us, we can, again, usually at the office, sit down in person, but we may be able to do this over the phone. Sit down with you and help you register as self-employed, as a sole trader, or as a limited company, in any of the ways I'm about to talk about. If you're worried about not doing it right, give us a ring and we can help you with that for free. So just let us know. So it is pretty straightforward, quite easy to set up, and also you don't need to. So a private limited company, which we'll go into in a second, will need to register on Companies House and publicly announce their earnings through their accounts in Companies House. You don't need to do that when you're a sole trader. You keep personal accounts and you submit your self-assessment tax return on a yearly basis. The way that works is you go through the year, which is the tax year, which is April to April, and then the following January 31st is your deadline to submit your self-assessment tax return. The deadline is a bit earlier. Essentially, you need to register and be ready to submit that tax return before that point. So you need to give yourself plenty of time to register, because it involves things like codes being posted to you to confirm your address and things like that. So you register as a sole trader online and you submit a self-assessment tax return. Now, I'll go over in a bit more detail. I believe it's probably the last video in this series about tax and how that works for different business structures. One of the main disadvantages of being a sole trader is that you have unlimited liability. Because your business and yourself are the same legal entity, you and that business have the same finances. If the business is sued, you are sued. So it's not just the business is not separate from you. And also, it also is perhaps a bit, people maybe see it as less, I don't know how to put it, like legitimate. Like sometimes people want it to be a private limited company because it comes with a little bit of prestige. So just something to consider, but it is the easiest way to do it, the easiest way to essentially become self-employed. And also, it's not like completely out of the realms of possibility that you could start as a sole trader and then move on to being a limited company if you wanted to a bit down the line. Loads of people do that. It is reasonably easy to do. So yeah. I'll move on now to a limited company, which is the other sort of most popular form of self-employment. Here, when you have a limited company, you are creating a completely separate legal entity. So by that I mean you create this limited company, and that company, money comes in and out of that company, whether it's wages to you or sales into the company, or as drawings or as dividends out to you, and that is separate. The business has its own bank account. The business is its own legal entity. Losses are the business's losses and not necessarily your losses. I mean, it'll be tied to how much money you can take out of the business, how much it makes, but that is separate to you. It can also, another advantage of a limited company is it can be easier to raise finance than when you're a sole trader. Some sort of like finance providers will prioritize limited companies over sole traders just because of the limited risk. Now, also one advantage of a limited company is because this is a separate legal entity, it can you can apply for like a loan and finance as the limited company, and that can be, as I say, limited to the company. So if that loan doesn't work out, then that is the company's loss, and the company might go under, but you and your finances could be separate. Now, one thing I should mention is that sounds great and perfect and, you know, a really low risk way to take out a loan. However, in most scenarios, banks will often, especially with new businesses, ask you to personally be the guarantor for that loan. So in theory, it's great that business can apply for a loan and that is the business's loan and not yours. But the reality of it is that often banks will ask you to be a guarantor. So it's kind of cool, but also not necessarily ideal. Another thing, a disadvantage of having a limited company is that this legal entity needs to file its accounts annually with Companies House, and that is publicly available. So you will need to have your accounts done and published on Companies House, and those accounts will include things like the money coming into and out of your business, and will also include things like the business address, which may, you know, be your address depending on how you do it. If you don't have like separate business location for your business, or like office location for your business, so you are giving away a little bit of privacy. It is possible for people to access a lot of information about your business, and that information would not necessarily be accessible if you went with sole trader. It can also involve a bit more paperwork. It's a little bit more complicated to set up and register. It costs about £12 in order to register a limited company. So yeah, there are some pros and cons of each. I'd say the biggest difference between them, though, is essentially the limit of liability. So I will illustrate this with an example. It's an example that a lawyer we work with, who's very good, called Peter Milliken, gives when he sort of talks to our class sometimes. So this lawyer had a client where they were a self-employed builder, like working in construction, and they provided a client with a 15 grand extension to their house. And while they were working, they accidentally damaged a sort of internet connection line while they were working. Now, what they didn't realise was that the person that they were building for, the person who owned the house, who was inside the house working from home, was a stockbroker who relied very heavily on that internet connection in order to, you know, make money and trade stock. I don't really yeah, essentially to work. And through losing that internet line, that person lost over £300,000 worth of sales over the course of a few days while they got it fixed. He sued the builder for that money, and the builder was a sole trader. So that means that when he sued the builder, when he sued the business for causing that damage, he sued the business as well as, like, at the same time as suing the person, because they are the same legal entity. So that meant that the person's, you know, mortgage was at risk, their personal assets were at risk, as well as the business. Now, if that had been a limited company and the business got sued like that, the damages, the amount of money having to be paid out, all that sort of thing, that would have been, as it, you know, clues in the title, limited to the business. So maybe the business would have gone under. Maybe the business wouldn't have been able to cope with that loss. Maybe it would have gone bankrupt and all its assets given away in order to try and pay off that amount. But the person, the builder, would have been separate from it. His mortgage, his his possessions would have been separate from that situation, and so would have had some more protection. So there's an example of when it would have been incredibly useful for them to be a limited company and have that legal liability limited. so what you really need to think about when you're trying to work out, right, which business structure is the right one for me, is how much risk is there in your business? How much do you how important is it for you to sort of create that separate entity? I'm also just going to say something very quickly about business bank accounts in both of these two scenarios. So when I said that as a sole trader, I'll just go back to that really quickly. As a sole trader, you and your business's finances are essentially the same. What this means is that technically you don't need to have a business bank account, because you and your business's finances are, yeah, as I say, the same. Now, in reality, so legally it's not a requirement, but I will tell you why you should have a separate business bank account anyway, and that is because it will almost definitely be outside the terms and conditions of your bank's current account for you to operate a business using that account. They'll usually essentially if they find out that you're using your current account for business purposes, you'll get in a bit of trouble with the bank, and they'll probably ask you to set up a business bank account. It's quite easy to do. You can do so with most banks. One thing, it usually does cost a bit of money, but a lot of banks are willing to give you some time for free. There's also some alternatives that don't use standard banks, such as Tide or Revolut or things like that, where those aren't necessarily standard banks. They're like apps you have on your phone that you can operate through a business account. Sometimes a business bank account will charge you monthly, and sometimes they'll just charge you per transaction, or sometimes they'll do both, and they'll come with various limits about how much money can go through the account and things like that. Basically, there's a lot more to think about. It's a bit different compared to a current account. It used to be the case that some current accounts were fine for business purposes, but I think Santander for a while was fine, but now it's kind of all been ironed out, and pretty much all current accounts won't allow you to operate a business through them. And with a limited company, you do legally need a different bank account for the company. It can't be the same as yours. One thing I will also mention, actually, no, I'll talk about that when we get to tax. Essentially, there's different tax scenarios in both of these as well, but there's no point going over that now, because at the end of this course, we'll be going ahead to tax. Look forward to that. Bring your calculator. Right, some other business structures also are partnerships. So this is essentially two sole traders coming together and sharing responsibility for the business. So you share profits and have unlimited liability for losses, much like a sole trader, but with another person involved. And each partner pays tax on the money they get out of the business. I'll go over tax, as I say, in a bit. Now, one thing I would say about a partnership is that you as well as the sort of unlimited liability for losses and things within your business, you are to an extent liable for the partner as well, which complicates things quite a lot. So if you're going into a partnership with someone and they build up a load of debt for the business and go AWOL, you are often liable for that. So essentially, I would advise not starting a partnership with someone that you do not trust implicitly. And also, if you're going to start a partnership, get a partnership agreement. And a partnership agreement covers things like what happens if, it sounds morbid, but someone dies, or even someone gets a divorce or something like that. Because imagine, imagine you have two partners in a business, and one of them gets divorced. Now, what happens when you get divorced? Half of your stuff can go to the person you're getting a divorce from, and that means that a quarter of the business could go to someone who as the other partner, have no involvement with or don't have any working relationship with. A similar scenario to if one partner obviously were unfortunately to die. Maybe they're all there. If you had a business partnership, again, two people, and one of the partners unfortunately dies, then all of their possessions, including their 50% stake or whatever the stake is in the business, goes to the next of kin. And again, this is someone who you may not want to work with, or you may have no sort of understanding of the business, and suddenly they have a 50% stake and can make decisions in the business. There are a few ways to deal with this. For example, having a clause in a partnership agreement where, in the event of those happening, shares are at least temporarily put over to the other person for the duration of like a divorce, or for or a life insurance policy is put out, which is paid out to the family, that will pay essentially to buy back the half of the business that has been that they, instead of them inheriting it, and so they get a payout, and you get to keep 100% control of the business. Essentially, there's lots of legal matters involved, and essentially that if you want to be very careful about it, which I would be, you want a partnership agreement, and I would also seek legal advice in getting a partnership agreement if possible. So yeah, those are partnerships. Essentially, they're tricky because, you know, the more people you get involved in something, the harder it gets a lot of the time. And then there's a limited liability partnership. So this is perhaps a safer option. Essentially, it is like a partnership, but liability is limited, and you're not liable to the same extent for your partner and what they do. There's some other ones, such as a community interest company and other sort of non-profit structures, such as a business limited by guarantee. So these are business structures where they're created sort of in order to help a community or help a cause, and they'll take in money, and they'll take in profit, and they'll pay a wage to their staff, but the profit they make, they are legally required to put that back into the business, or put that into the interest of that community. To give you an example, PNE, the company that I work for and that run this course, are a non-profit company limited by guarantee. So what that means is, when we make any money from various contracts we have or various funders we have, we spend that money on business costs and paying staff and stuff, and then the profit we make after that goes back into the company and creating projects that offer support to the sort of the community that we're aimed at. So people starting businesses in the Northeast. So yeah, a social enterprise, limited by guarantee, is quite a common structure for a social enterprise, but a social enterprise can be any business structure whatsoever. It's not its own standalone legal business structure. It's a business which itself has social aims, and it can be a not-for-profit or it can be for-profit. It's just sort of a business that has social aims and something, it may want to improve a community, or it may want to sort of help fundraise for a certain group. So a social enterprise, any business can be a social enterprise. Again, PNE, another example of a social enterprise. So yeah, a lot of different business structures to think of, and maybe you've got your eyes on at least one or a couple. But yeah, worth thinking about in some detail which one will be right for you. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about sustainability. It is very important to consider sustainability within your business, and easiest to do so before you even get the business going. So what is sustainability? It's meeting the needs of the present without the present generation, without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. Essentially, running stuff in a way that will be able to continue, hopefully indefinitely. Now, it's not just like that. You probably heard this term sustainability in the context of the environment, using recycling, using biodegradable stuff, that sort of thing. But sustainability isn't just about the environment. It's got, actually, there are 3 pillars to it. So there's social sustainability. So this is the way society works. It's things like people having good jobs and good living conditions, and access to healthcare, access to education, things like that. Are parts of a society being sustainable and being able to continue in a good way. Then there is also environmental, of course. So yeah, treating the planet and treating our ecosystems in a way that means that we'll be able to use them in the future. And then there's economic sustainability. So make a business being sustainable in financial terms means that it can actually continue to work and make profits. This is also relating to stuff like the general economic well-being of a country, Uh, things like jobs are also connected to it, and things like the payment you give to staff and things like that. The things like providing a living wage, it's sort of a cross between economic and social, really. But yeah, all things to consider when you think about the sustainability within your business. So why should you care? Here's some reasons. Um, Brand image can be absolutely huge. More and more, as essentially the situation gets a bit more dire, I think, people are beginning to care more and more about the sustainability of businesses, whether that's, as I say, social, economic, or environmental sustainability. It can be a really huge boost to your business's credibility and sort of yeah, essentially your brand to show that it's being sustainable and operating ethically. Ethically? Good lord, ethically. So yeah, making sure that you have that. Sometimes I think customers is sometimes when a customer wants to buy a product, and they're sort of teetering on the decision, they just need one additional reason to be like, yeah, okay, and whether that's oh, it's biodegradable, or oh, cool, when they made this product, they paid all of people making it fairly, or they didn't import it, that it was made locally. Sometimes you just need that extra bit of a reason to buy something, and also having that attached to your product can increase the amount that people are willing to spend on it. So yeah, a lot of different reasons where sustainability can come in real handy for your business. Increase productivity and reduce costs. So if you're sustainable in terms of things you buy, or things like traveling and stuff within your business, a lot of sustainable practices can also limit costs. So if you decide to, for example, as I say, maybe you limit the like importation of goods, is a good example. So say you want to make a product that involves you flying ingredients from a country very far away, which obviously would have a large impact on global emissions and things like that. And then the alternative is to buy locally. Now importation is getting more and more expensive, so that could be a way to save money within your business. As well as that, being responsible of little things like not using too much paper or stationery within your business, trying to limit that can save you money. So maybe instead of printing out a lot of documents or a lot of advertising, you can instead go digital with that, and that saves you money on printing and ink and all sorts of things over the long term. It's a bit like buying double glazing for your house. It'll cost a bit of money perhaps up front, but over time you'll see that cost return to you. It can also attract and retain employees. People are far more, well, it's been shown that people are more willing to work for companies that are sustainable and ethical, and they will work harder for those companies, and when you see that a company is making ethical decisions. So, yeah, as I hinted at earlier, now is the best time to be thinking about sustainability. It is far more easy to integrate like sustainable practices into a business from the very, very beginning. And to if you sort of make it clear to yourself how you're going to be what commitment you'll make to being sustainable in your business, what decisions you'll make, because here is when you're making very, very key decisions within your business about the very nature of your business and about the product you're offering. So now is the time to make those decisions with sustainability in mind. And yeah, it makes business sense. It's essentially, as well, there are stats behind it that show that it's a growing trend. 60% of businesses say that they take sustainability as seriously as economic performance. So it is a growing number of businesses are really trying to take the wheel when it comes to making their businesses sustainable. And 50% of businesses, of companies, so most companies are planning to increase their expenditure on sustainability. Now that is an interesting trend to know as a business, but also an interesting trend to know, seeing as if you're selling those sustainable products or services, those companies may look to you before they look to other people. That is a market opportunity right there. And here are some here are some good resources to go to learn more about sustainability, or to essentially, there's in a lot of cases a lot more support available for businesses which are, incorporating these sustainable practices, because it's become quite a essentially buzzword, especially recently as our sort of climate crisis increases, for businesses to be sustainable. So as that happens, more resources are available for businesses trying to make sustainable decisions. One is Impact Hub, which is a global entrepreneurial network that can help support you in various ways, and also create a network of people with the same sort of goals as you. Investors in the Environment, this is kind of similar to Investors in People, which is the sort of like a also mark of approval for a business to show, this business is sustainable and adopts sustainable practices. And in the same way as Investors in People, sometimes contractors and customers in general are more willing to buy from that company because they have been able to show, yes, I am taking my like sustainability responsibility seriously. That was a hell of a sentence to get out. Fast forward 2030, again, a network of entrepreneurs, and I think some support, perhaps even funding if you keep an eye on it, available to try and help those goals happen. That's referring to, so Fast Forward 2030 is referring to the Sustainable Development Goals, the goal of which is to achieve them by 2030. PNE Enterprise, ourselves, we offer some support for specifically sustainable businesses through our Sustainable Startup Award. Also, as I say, in the future, we may be pursuing sustainability masterclasses, so keep an eye out. And then last but not least, Sustainable Business Network. So a network of organizations that prioritize their impact on the environment and sustainability. As I was saying, it's so important to build up your network, and build up your network with people as well that are relevant to you and essentially can offer something to provide you support going forward. And if you're a sustainable business, this is sort of gold dust essentially. These are ready-made networks and support organizations already in place to help you achieve your goal. I think that's the end of this section, so I'll move on to the next one.